Hi, welcome to this video. I'm about to show you an interview that I did with a great drummer and music educator called Andy Edwards. He's played with Robert Plant and he's got a lot of experience working in the fusion scene in the UK. So we have a really in-depth conversation here about music education and just the whole learning process. So we jump right into it and he's talking about different concepts in terms of how he understands music and how he communicates it to his students. So I hope you guys enjoy this. It's quite an in-depth discussion and lots of interesting points raised. So thanks very much for watching and I'll see you next time.
Well, I think with music, it's what's really interesting is I've always thought to rather than try and make things complex, try and make them as simple as possible, to really try and philosophically come down to what's going on as simply as possible. And for me, there's basically two parameters in music. There's like there's a vertical, which is basically low to high, so the frequency range, or maybe even the spatial range. It's a sort of vertical component, which is I think where harmonic theory comes into place. But also, if you're a drummer, you become very aware of putting, say, a ride cymbal next to your bass drum and then putting two toms together, which is another type of, that you would call that arrangement, but I would also see that as being this vertical axis.
Okay.
And then you've got a horizontal axis, which is basically the decoration of time, and how, sort of putting a grid through and then decorating it. And what's really interesting, I think, is that you have to do that abstraction to understand music, and that's really what's always going on. So you were describing one method of discussing the horizontal, and then if you start to talk about the scales, it would be the vertical, right? But actually, in understanding theory, because we divide those two things apart, when they're apart, they're really difficult to understand. You can't understand them in isolation. It's only when you put them together that they make sense. So one thing that I do when I teach is I say to them, I want you to memorise, I say to the class, I want you to memorise this rhythm, and it goes like this, and I go, right, I'll do this thing, and then I'll say, do you want me to do it again? And I go, and they go, we can't remember. I said, all right, I will, because all I've done is given you the horizontal. I'm now going to give you a bit of vertical. We're going to add a few notes in. I see the little silhouette of a man, Scaramouche, Scaramouche, do you see the fandango, thunderbolt of lightning, very, very, and of course, oh yeah, we all know that now.
Oh, right.
Because that rhythm is not understandable, really, unless you add the vertical to it. It's a really fundamental and obvious concept, but people aren't aware of it. Is that and now the other way around, if someone said, "Can you sing a fifth?" and they go, "Well, I can't even imagine a fifth," because you're trying to imagine two notes at the same time vertically. So go, "Well, Star Wars is a fifth," da, da, and then go, "Oh, I know that," because what you've done is taken the vertical and added the horizontal to it. Yeah. And so often when trying to understand music, I think that's a fundamental starting point, is to put the one into the other. And I think Indian classical music's really interesting in that a lot of the methods do that, so they don't just teach rhythms abstractly, they do add in some sort of, I've noticed even when they're doing the conical, it seems to go up and down. That seems to have a meaning to it, so but this is fundamental. It happens with absolutely everything. When I was playing a lot of progressive rock and had to memorise really complex rhythmical structures, I would often put in some sort of rhythm, some sort of melody into it.
Right.
It's always easier to. I think melody is basically what we're saying is that those two components, when you put them together, what you get is melody.
Melody. And you need timing for it to be a melody. You take your harmony and you take your rhythm, put them together, you have melody, and of course that's the thing that everybody loves. And then the thing that then comes into this framework is the actual sound of the instrument, the timbre.
And I think once you start there, so you know what I'm describing here is a really basic way of understanding all theory. You know.
Yeah. Because you could apply that to whatever circumstance, however complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, because quite a good way I find to look at music theory or complicated things is that there's a sort of limited number of actual things that you have to be able to identify or understand. But what makes things feel more complicated is just how quickly they're coming at you, or how many things are piled on top of another. You know, so if people know about scale theory, that they just know, you know, just the notes of the major scale. They just know, you know, and they start to think of that as just numbers 1 to 7.
Yeah.
If you just hold on to that and you know that so well, then all of the other scales, or all the other, you know, the chord theory, everything, it's all just related back to those 7 notes. So it's almost like just how fast and fluid can you be with just remembering what those 7 notes are, and then seeing what all of the different variations on those are. It's almost like colours. You know, you've got your primary colours, and you know, every child that goes to school, you know, in the first year, they, you know, we all know are red or orange or green or blue, and yellow and purple, and then you've got grey. But then grey is like a combination of, you know, black with some white. You get grey, and then you mix all these different colours. You get all the different types of colours. And if you look at a colour chart, you can have infinite numbers of colours, but all you really need to know are like the primary colours, and then the combinations that you get from those. So with music, it's almost like that. You really just need to know the 7 notes of the major scale, and then any other note you can just spot how it's a sharp or a flat of one of those notes.
Yeah, that's you know, that's really
them up.
That's really interesting, because what you're saying there actually points to 2 other fundamental things that no one ever discusses. And the first is the fact that I think that if you're, say, learning a major scale, there's 2 places where that knowledge can reside. It can reside intellectually, where you know all about the major scale and you've studied it, and you can tell it's tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, tone. You know all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But that we could say, let's put this in real simple terms. We'll put that in our intellectual senses. Our intellectual understanding has it. But where we really need to play needs to be in our movement centres. So I'm talking to you, and actually the words I'm forming and the sounds I'm making are being made by my vocal cords, which is like muscles. That's movement. Yeah. So I'm not having to intellectually manipulate my vocal cords to make the sounds. That would be too hard. That's happening anyway. So I could think of where I want to go, and then my movement centres can just go, yeah, I know how to go there.
Yeah.
So when you study the major scale, you really need to put that major scale in the movement centres, so it's instantly accessible. And that's the difficult bit. You know, most people go, I understand the shape and I've run up and down it. But what they haven't done is put it into their movement centres for quick access. And the way I always describe this to students is that, for example, walking and talking. Say walking is far more complex than playing that major scale. It's far more complex and far more risk, you know. But what you're actually doing, and that's why it takes a toddler who is programmed to do it 2 to 3 years to do it. It's a real major achievement.
To do it. Yeah.
And so if I was to paint a white line across the floor that was, say, 6 inches wide, and said to you or me, can you just walk down the line? We would just happily walk down the line.
Yeah.
But if we were on top of a wall that was 6 inches wide and 100 feet high, what would happen then, and this is a really bad bit about human beings, is that when we tried to walk, we wouldn't go, right, the way to survive is just let your movement centres do it, because they know this inside out.
Yeah, they know it.
Our intellectual centre, which has got an ego, you know, that has got, would go, no, I better take control.
Yeah,
and then
this is dangerous. Yeah.
This is dangerous. So even though I'm worse at it, I'm going to take control. And so they would they would walk across like this. And I think that's the key to understanding how to practice and how to learn on your instrument is that the thing you're battling all the time is it needs to be put in the movement center, so it's sort of unconscious application. You can just go to it, and so that really means that you can hear a sound and your fingers know that where that is on the guitar. You haven't got to inch up. You go, right, I'm in G, so I'll play G major scale, and that starts there. We want to be able to go to it straight away. And then as we develop as musicians, we need to be aware that performance situations, we will always do that frightening thing and say, right, I better take over now. And I was very aware of this in recording studios. The red light would go on and I'd be there playing like this and be going, like, I'm watching every note I'm doing and trying to do it as carefully as I possibly can. I was thinking, no, this isn't the way you play. You've gone to a way of playing which is completely not how you've been playing, so there's that aspect of it which is really interesting. So the question is how do you practice the major scale and get it into your system? And I think it would be learning how to sing it, really studying each note at the major scale, seeing how it relates to the root, and really going round and round it, so you're training your ears up to hear it.
Exactly.
More than just make it. I made this mistake on guitar. I know I'd get there every single night and go, and you're only really practicing facility then. And I think this is where my interest in Indian classical music is, because it's such a old and well developed system that often when you look to the way they teach music, they would have a way of teaching a scale which actually embodies all the things we're talking about, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean the whole concept of sargam, which is like the solfege, like the do re mi fa si, do re mi fa sol la ti do, which I struggle to do that one. I know the sarigama pa da ni sa, I know that one better. But that whole system, it really gets hold of that, the language centers of your brain, and isn't it the very big part of your brain is really connected to like your hands and like how you move your hands, and then I think the language part of the brain is like a big powerful part of the brain as well. I know nothing about this stuff really, but I know it's a pretty substantial. There's a lot of energy in there. There's a lot of capacity, and this sargam it really links, I think, to the language centers of your brain. Because I started to look at sargam when I was when I was 19, when I started playing when I started playing Indian classical music, started playing sitar. I'd been playing guitar since I was 10, and I really got quite deeply into it, and I would try to I used to do a lot of mental, I still do mental practice. It just happens without meaning to, but at that age I was really consciously trying to do mental practice a lot. Just as I was walking around, I would always try to be imagining different patterns, different riffs I could play, and imagining what they would be in sargam. So it became a really nice connection for a few reasons. Well, one of them is that every interval you attach a syllable to it, and then you start to feel like you know that interval, like you know a person, like you know a character. So I know, this interval ma, I know that, I know how it sounds, and whenever I play that note I think of that syllable. And then you notice the position that it has in the octave, and how it maybe wants to pull down or how it wants to push up to the next note. So you really feel like you get to know each interval on a really personal basis. You start to really attribute those characteristics to them. But also, there's only so many combinations of these syllables. So, if you've got something like ma, then ma ga ma pa, or ma pa ma ga, or ga ma ga re sa. Like, even if you change into a different scale, different rag, you still use the same syllables, because that just represents, the position in the octave. So let's say you've got a 7-note scale, you've got those 7 syllables, and then if you change all of those 7 notes, if you like flat on them all or sharp on one of them, you've got all different notes in terms of like the notes on the keyboard, but you're still just singing, you know, sa, re is the second, ga is the third, ma is the fourth. You're still singing those same syllables. So you're just going over and over again these different syllables and the different combinations, different permutations. So then when you start to hear, you start to hear music, and then you hear a little phrase, and then something in your head just goes, oh, that was Sarigari-sa. Or like, oh, I heard those combinations, and you just start to know that, oh, it's that. But then the other thing is that in a performance situation, or when you're learning something, a singer can say, right, here's this phrase, or, you know, or they don't announce it, obviously, they just start singing to you, but they sing with sargam. And then as fast as you can hear it and think of it, you're hearing the notes, so you already kind of get a sense of what the notes are, but they're also attached to a syllable, so it's like they're telling you in real time what note it actually is. And then you hear them as blocks, you know, you hear them as more like words rather than individual letters, you hear them as words. So you just can learn stuff really quickly, and you can pick stuff up very, 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 very fast. So it's a really, really powerful concept, and it just does a lot for musicians, and really well-trained Indian classical musicians. They just all have very, very good ears, and it helps you to memorize things as well, because it goes into this kind of memory bank, which is all attached to these sargam syllables, sargam phrases, and there's so much repetition to it because there's only 7 syllables, and you know, a lot of melodies tend to have the same types of combinations. So it all seems, it's just very easy to memorize stuff in that system.
Yeah, I mean, there's 7 numbers in the National Lottery, so we should we should all be able to guess the numbers on, you know, Saturday night, but we can't, because at 7 actually permutates into a vast array of all the music, you know. Exactly. And, obviously with the sharps and flats, you know. What is interesting about this conversation for anybody who's watching it is this is some of the stuff I think that when someone's learning the instrument, they have decisions about music which are sort of wrong. And for me, that's fundamentally, as a teacher, what you've sort of got to get around, you know. And I think what this is a really important one. That by knowing every scale in the world and practicing these scales over and over again and knowing how they're structured, knowing all your theories, you're somehow going to be able to play music. Whereas in reality, the only way to play music is to hear it first and then play it on your instrument. And that is a really difficult skill to attain. I haven't attained it yet. I can't just play what I want that I can hear. And I wish I could, but my practice now is a lot more to fundamentally develop that skill, which I think is what you're saying. And the Indian classical system of actually naming a note, and actually, so because what you want to be able to do is to cut the middleman out. You don't want to have the intellectual part stepping in and going, right, so what key we're in? G. You know, and I really want to play a 4th, because a 4th will sound really good here. So that'll be what is it? A C. So play a C right now. You don't want to do that. You want to just be able to hear that C and go for it instantaneously. And I've always said to all my students, I said, if you put like a bebop tune on and you could sing a solo through it, and you can play anything that you sing on your guitar or saxophone, you could play anything that you could sing instantaneously, then you don't need any theory, you don't need anything at all. You don't need to know what key you're in, you don't need to know anything, because and what I found with students is that at the starting point, they're actually incapable of actually going. That's the first skill you've got to be able to do, is to be able to sing. And so, because as a drum teacher, the one I get is people always come for lessons and they go, I say, what do you want to do? And they said, oh, I just want to play around the kit. You know, you just seem to just play around the kit. Well, what they've been doing is that intellectual thing of just learning patterns and then learn to play them. So they've taught themselves to play patterns. And I always say to them, I go, can you do this? And I go, and they can't. They're literally going to be able to if you can't verbalise that solo. And I've had to practice that. I've had to practice going, you know, looking at the 16th note series. That was a 5. And practice that verbally. If I could sing it, then I should be able to go. And that's quite intellectual as well. I can actually control that because I can verbalise it and I can sing it. And then you've got to then practice being able to play what you can sing. And I'm afraid it does require a little bit of theory knowledge for most people. You know, it does.
Yeah.
You know,
but I remember thinking about that when I first really started to learn theory, going to music college. I was always very happy to learn it. You know, actually I got really crazy about theory, but I could already play quite a lot up to that point, and you know, my idol being Jimi Hendrix, and a lot of blues guitar players from that background have this sort of thing of well, you don't really need theory, do you? Because look at Jimi Hendrix and all that. And I remember kind of thinking, well, yeah, it's like you could get by with theory. You could get by without theory if you were just so musical, if it was just so in your bones that anything that came your way, you just heard it and you could just perceive those notes like crystal clear, and then your ear was just so good. There's no reason why you couldn't do it, but the theory will just, but learning theory will just basically help you wherever you are, whatever your kind of current state of musicality is. It will just help you to get a bit better.
Totally. Yeah.
So
I'm not arguing against theory.
You know a lot of theory, so I know that you're not like in the anti-theory camp. But I think it is a good point to note that it's not like theory, because also then that tends to make people think that maybe theory is the answer to everything. And it's
that's my point. You see, this is my point here. You know, the point I'm trying to make is if you're a student watching this. Right, what I'm saying is that learning the theory intellectually won't get you anywhere at all. Right, you have to be able to sing all theory, and embodying it is being able to sing it. You know, it's being able to sing it, and then once you can sing it, you need to be able to put that onto your instrument. So you may have to do, say, if you're a guitar player, a lot of interval practice. Where you may have to have a practice routine that goes right fist, ba, da, you know, and then work out on the guitar all the fifth, you know, which very good guitar teachers I've seen often start with that actual exercise, is getting people to hear intervals, and then get them. Some really good guitar teachers I once said, what are you doing? What do you do first with the students? He goes, we take a note, and then we take a third, and we say, right, from that note, where are all the thirds relative to that, and then get them to learn that relative to that note. And I thought that's very, very, very clever. That is, because if they can hear a third, and they've linked the sound of a third to a third jump on a guitar, and they know all the possibilities. Then straight away now they've got an extra skill, haven't they? Because they can hear the note they want to go to, and they know where it is on the guitar. And I think, going right back to what you said, that's something. These things are really embodied in Indian classical music methods. This, you know, I have nowhere near the knowledge you have of this, but I've still been.
But only of you've got the same. It's obvious to me you've got the same relative knowledge, and even more knowledge than me in certain areas, but it's just in a different system. The system. I noticed this a lot. I think we both discussed this, that we both came to Indian music through John McGoughlin. So you have this the rock routine. You know. He's the main route.
And I think. For me, I was almost searching, and remember I was a drummer, so we're talking about harmony, but with rhythm even more so. I was searching for certain. I could hear sounds that were like getting me really excited, you know, and I was searching for what that was. When I heard the Mavish Noxture, I went, oh my god, this is it. And Billy Cobham's the guy, and Aronoff Michael Walden, I loved him as well. And so I was in my own, because I'm self-taught. I had to try and find my own way of getting to be able to play those rhythms.
Right.
And luckily, right after the Mavish structure, you had Shakti, and I sort of understood when I heard the conical stuff on there, because I was baffled by Shakti, because there's certain moments where it sounds like John McLaughlin's playing solos, but the guitar player is mirroring every single note that he's playing, and I'm going, well, is this improvised or not, and how have they done this? And then I heard them doing the talking and thought, I just thought John McLaughlin must have had to learn this other language. It must be a I got it basically by listening to music. But this is the incredible thing about music, is that I believe that when you study music, you're actually studying more than just music. Everything opens up into, there's whole worlds there if you want to go into those worlds. You know, there's parallel knowledge as well. Which you're going to get there naturally if you just really study it, you know. So for example, the major scale, I was really interested in why it had 7 notes. I didn't know anything about the overtone series. I didn't know that they existed as it was. But I was really interested in the fact that there's like the 7 dwarfs and there's 7 days a week. Yeah. And the number 7 kept cropping up everywhere, and I thought, you know, why is and people say I myself felt that the number 7 was important. A lot of people said it was their lucky number, and I thought, why 7? Why 7 notes? And then why an octave? And I then studied that a little bit, you know. So there's things embodied in these scales that are bigger than just the scale. You know, there's knowledge, ancient knowledge embodied in these scales. And one of the things that I found really interesting was the idea of the spaces where the black notes aren't.
Where the black notes aren't?
Yeah, between B and C and E and F.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That you know, that was very interesting to me. Why those bits didn't have? Why didn't they just organise it? Why organise it like that? Yeah. And not organise it, because you could have just organised it that it was like a straight scale of 12 notes. You could have organised it so there was black notes in between, but they didn't. And I remember reading, it was from the Armenian mystic Gurdjieff, that he said, and he has this thing, the law of the octave, and the law of the octave is that every single process that exists has sort of 7 stages. This is really simplifying it. There's 7 stages, and this is really ancient knowledge. Yeah. But for a process to go forward, it requires a shock. And it would require a shock between the 3rd and the 4th, and then to go to the next octave, it requires an even greater shock. This is really weird, but interesting. Yeah, is that? And I thought, well, is that the case? Then I noticed, I would notice that it was, you know, and they, you know, things like when a tree grows, it grows for a certain thing, and then there's a shock and it moves off and it splits off. And these sort of ideas that. So if you start on an endeavour, and that endeavour will naturally have sort of 7 stages to get to the next part, and you will toddle along for the first 3, but then when you get to between the 3rd and the 4th, it will require a sort of shock, which is sort of an outside influence usually, or some great. This is really relating to sort of mysticism. Yeah. You know, it would require some sort of meditational focus to make that jump. You know, and I just how true all this I don't know, but I was always really interested in this type of stuff. I always felt that music related. It was always related to things outside. So yeah, that 7-note scale is very strange. It embodies all sorts of knowledge.
Sure. I mean, it's all phenomena, isn't it? It's all, you know, it's hard to know what the meaning of these things is, but it is there. You know, you can perceive these things, and you can spot the patterns and the tendencies, what seems to be the kind of natural unfolding, and all of, you know, the physics, you know, behind the overtones and the intervals, and how that, you know, you take the first 5 harmonics, you know, notes of the harmonic series, and then that gives you the major pentatonic scale.
Yeah.
so there is a kind of natural order to that, and there's something about the way that then we as kind of organisms, you know, our ears hear these different ratios, and the intervals and the harmonies that tend to sound more balanced are the ones which have more simple mathematical ratios. So the way that the different frequencies are sort of beating together, sort of they match up, or there's some nice kind of pattern is formed, and then the more complex dissonant sort of harmonies, when you look at the mathematics and the way that the different ratios are working, they're much more complicated mathematically. But it's I mean, Adam Neely talks a lot about this, how it's like your ear can do math. It's like your ear I mean that's kind of like putting it into an intellectual way, but it's more just like your ear senses the vibrations, and if the vibrations are kind of more coming at a rate where they're blending together, then that's fine. But if it's like too many ripples all at once, then that's more dissonant. But of course that's also stimulating and intriguing, and it kind of makes you wake up a little. Yeah,
well, I think it's what you have is I talked about these two components here, right? We've got these two components. That could you could almost say, well, if you take a particle, the particle's a wave, which is time, and that's the horizontal, and it's also matter exactly at the same time, which is the vertical. Yeah. From an evolutionary point of view, we've evolved to grasp for food, right, and to protect ourselves from threat.
Yeah.
So we've and our brains wired up in two hemispheres which do those two things. And you know, I've talked elsewhere about music always seems to be a personification of a sort of threat detector, which we could say is order. Yeah. You know, which often you know, embodies itself in music as perfectionism and everything being nailed in the right place. And then you've got the emotionalism, which you could call hedonism. So I've always seen music as a natural balance between hedonism and perfectionism, or order or chaos. This is humanity. We're talking about human, you know, heaven and earth, male and female, all these things.
Yeah, they're the core things.
Absolutely. You know, so the question is, you know, Andy's sounding like he's talking a lot of hippie stuff now. It's all very intellectual. But does music really do that? Well, the thing that's interesting for me is you said about how harmonies are ratios, but that physically means that if we were to take a harmony and slow it down, we would end up with beating.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so suddenly we go, hang on, the harmony is rhythm.
Yeah.
And the rhythm is harmony. So it's embodied two things at the same time. So this is where I would see this really works. If you take jazz, and to some extent in classical music, there's a thing in that which I would call groove. It's different to time. It's the groove, isn't it? I think, is it in classical music, it's this shruti? Is that the name for it? Is that right?
Means it can mean microtone. It can also mean listen.
Oh, does it? Yeah. So
I know you're thinking get down and shruti.
Shruti. Yeah. When I
you think it means get down and groove. It means get down and listen.
Get down and listen. So yeah. But I was really aware of this. It's, you know, Bach is in time. Yeah. And the time is really interesting, but it doesn't groove. It's not James Brown. And so I started to work out what this could be. And with jazz, that's rooted, part of it is in African music. And African music is based around a polyrhythm, and it's based around syncopation. So if we take this 3/2 polyrhythm, if we take that 3/2, so I got 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2, you know, and then we syncopated, so we get this 1 2 3 4. We come up with the rhythm and goes da 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 da. And if we just take the second one out, we get da 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 da, which is the fundamental rhythm of jazz. Da 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 da. So when you play that rhythm, pa ta 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 ta. You're thinking of ba ta 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 ta, but you're also thinking of da 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 da. I can't sing it and do it at the same time. Da 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 da. So you're actually hearing, when you hear any jazz swing, two actual tempo worlds. They're existing at the same time. Right, and your ear doesn't go, oh, I don't like that. It goes, I'm confused by it, but I'm intrigued by it, and I want to solve it, and I'm going to keep. It's compelling because I'm going to keep coming back to it.
Yeah, it's got that forward motion.
Yeah, and because I think it's and this happens in music over and over again. This thing where what makes it catchy or interesting is the fact it's compelling, because we like it, but we can't quite grasp it. Our bodies can feel the time, but they go, well, there's another time here going on. And, you know, when James Brown goes, you know, that sort of cold sweat beat, he goes, here's the time, no, here's the time. And you go, well, I can feel it, but my body's being told to go. And even like house music, where you go, and anyone who's been in a nightclub, you'll feel your body going from, well, here's the beat, and then everything seems to be gravitating over to the other side. And I think that happens rhythmically, it happens harmonically. It can happen with the subject matter. You know, country music is like happy harmonies with sad lyrics, and you put those two together, and you go, I don't quite get this. And I think for musicians, these fundamental things I'm discussing here, these are what, if you know that, right, you will go back to practicing, realising that as much as you can go down the perfectionist route and have all your scales down and be able to play the cleverer and cleverer and cleverer and cleverer, but the great musicians are the ones that are able to balance that with these other aspects. In other words, you know, I think musicians can go down a very complex harmonic route, they can go down a very complex rhythmic route, but put the two together and really master those together, which is mastering melody. They're all the musicians that are hugely successful, the ones who have mastered melody, you know. And that would just be a tiny thing that you could arrive at just by thinking of these things I'm discussing, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense, and because there always has to be that intrigue, you know, there has to be a bit of push and pull between those two different musical elements. I mean, it's hard to think of any musician who's really developed a style or a kind of voice that's only kind of one-dimensional.
Yeah.
You know, all of the artists who, you know, because you need that relationship between two things, like that. There has to be a relational quality. Like there's nothing that's really meaningful to us which is really singular. You know, there always has to be a bit of that male and female, or yin and yang, or night and day. This is it. There's always got to be that, you know. And then there's different elements. Like one of them becomes more dominant, and the other one becomes more dominant. You know, as the, you know, like, as the pendulum swings, as they say, you know, just all of these different things that give that balance. And then
there we go, and that's the word. I mean, if there's a student in music, we're all students of music. If someone's watching this and they want to get something from the video, what we're talking about is the importance of balance. That all the time you're playing, you know, there are often two competing things. And I brought them down very simply in my mind to perfectionism and hedonism, the emotional part and the nailed part. So when I talk about this, musicians will think, oh, he's just saying that you need, you know, if you've got a student that's very emotional, they really express themselves great, this too raggedy and out of time, and their tuning's not great. You're going to ask them to balance it by bringing in a bit of order and start nailing the notes. And those musicians will think, oh, Andy's too much into the technique and all the method. But then if you've got somebody who's gone down that route too far, and we all know those types of musicians where you go, well, this is very impressive, but I am a little bit bored after 2 minutes of hearing just absolute nailed precision, then you would go, you need a few more, you need to let loose a bit, you know, don't worry about the mistakes. And we all understand that balance.
Yeah.
That's really, really important. And I find that when you're playing, this actually breaks down into lots of different little types of balances. So you might have playing fast and playing slow. You might have playing very high and then very low. There might be these two things. And I've found that's really inspirational to go, right, what am I actually doing now? You're playing really fast. So now stop and play something slow and play something slow. And then to look at what you're doing and go, right, now what am I doing? Well, I'm tending to play like, you know, very in time. So why don't you play out of time as a balance? And I've found that the great musicians, I'm a massive fan of Frank Zappa's guitar playing.
Yeah.
And a lot of guitarists don't like him because they think he's scrappy, and he's not scrappy. It's just, he's so well balanced. There's very few guitarists that can play for like 15 minutes and hold your interest, and Zappa's one. He can do a whole triple album of guitar solos and you listen all the way through, and I think it's because he's got a composer's mentality. He steps back and goes, right, what am I doing? And he'll see he does different things. So there's stuff that is very precise, very beautiful, very well played, but it's balanced against stuff that is quite scrappy and, you know, and all that type.
I think that side of things, because Jimmy could be a bit like that too sometimes. So I think it's more like willful chaos.
Yeah, it's of course.
Yeah, it's just allowing you to physically interact with the instrument in a different way that just creates more of like, whether it's a sound effect or it's just a sensation of just something kind of boiling over. Because when you really listen to those guys, and you know they're being more like straight ahead with what they're doing, you know, they're just super accurate, you know, they're like really gripping every note, but they're just allowing a bit of chaos to come in, you know. And
I think one of the things we must state is that this is not knocking anybody. Like, no. So say when you listen to Hendrix, when I was a kid, we were all into Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and those guitarists, and a lot of the guys around then were going, well, I don't really like Hendrix because he sounds really scrappy. And this used to annoy me because I loved Hendrix. But what the case was really was the scrappiness and chaos of Hendrix culturally was required in the 1960s. It was a requirement. In the 1980s,
the wildness.
It was a different requirement. So I think musicians are often shifting the balance. So the balance isn't set. The balance shifts around. And I can remember in the 80s, we were all listening to Vai and Satriani, and me and my mate were really into those guitarists. We were buying everybody, you know, George Lynch and Yngwie Malmsteen and Paul Gilbert, Sean Lane. We were listening to all those guitarists. And then one day, this guy turns up to my house, he goes, I've got this, and it was a Robert Cray album.
All right.
And we put it on, and of course, what that did was to put all those 80s metal guitarists, they suddenly were just plonked into a thing here. We went, oh my God, this is Robert Cray. And then we heard Jeff Healey, and then Stevie Ray Vaughan. And it was, you could feel like the pendulum, the balance pendulum had just suddenly swung the other way, you know. And so, and this is a brilliant thing about music. It's, you know, music does toddle and goes over to the one, and then when it just gets too extreme, somebody comes along who's a genius, and then they have their unique way of pulling it over, you know. In practical terms, I must relate a story which really just sums all this up for me, which was the most important bit of information I've ever been told in my life. So I was doing a drum clinic down in Southend. It was the first big drumming clinic I'd ever done in my life, and it was about 1,000 people in Southend with Simon Phillips. And Simon Phillips was an utter hero of mine. And when I came to actually do the show, I got really frightened. And I can remember going down to the side of the stage and looking at my little drum kit set up in front of Simon's huge drum kit, you know, with about 1,000 guys with Zildjian t-shirts all sat with their arms folded waiting for me to come out. And I started to, like I say, the intellectual bit started to kick in, and I thought, I can't do this, I won't be able to do this. What am I going to do? And I remember thinking, I could just go out and just play and not do much. I thought, no, you haven't even got the option, it's a drum clinic, you've got to go out and play. Yeah. What am I going to do? So I went over, there was no one backstage except me and Simon. We were just left in our two separate dressing rooms. So I went up and knocked on Simon's door, and I said, Simon, said, "You all right?" And I'd only just met him, and he's a legend. He's one of my favourite drummers. So it was really something for me to say, "Simon, I'm a bit frightened. I don't know whether I can do this." And Simon turned around and said, "I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice." Right? "I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice." He goes, "The big problem you've got is you're going out to play the drums." He said, "You shouldn't be going out to play the drums. You should be going out to play music." And straight away I was like, "Oh God, yeah." And then he said, "The next thing is when you go out there, you want to do everything that you could do." He says, "If you're any good, you can't do that. So," he says, "just try and do something good tonight. You don't have to do everything. Just do something cool and make sure it's musical. You know, play music, play a piece of music on the drums rather than, and make sure it's a statement just for tonight." And that was really great. And then he said the one that it really worked for me. He said, when you start playing, imagine that you've got in front of you, you've got a gauge, and that measures the intensity of your playing. He said, so you start playing and the gauge starts to go up. He says, when it gets to sort of up halfway, he said, knock the intensity back. And then he said, it'll creep up again. He said, then just knock it back. So I was so stressed, I went out and did precisely that. I thought, I'll play some music, I'll try and make it musical, I won't try and do anything, I'll just pick on one thing. And I decided to do like a half-time shuffle. So I'll just go out and do a half-time shuffle, start there. And I can remember I went out and started to play this half-time shuffle, so I just went in, bum, and I thought, what am I going to do now? They expected to fill. And I thought, well, don't play it. And I went, bum, and at that point, they all started clapping. Oh, when I put that gap, they went, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I did it again. And I kicked in. And they all clapped again because I was musical. I'd use space. I'd use all the stuff that we all know is the building blocks of music, you know. Yeah. And every time that I do a fill, and every time the fill, I start to get a bit, because my confidence grew, so I thought, I'd try and and then I thought, notch it back down. By the end of it, I was just burning. I was burning all over the kit. I wasn't even, I was just on fire. Then I remember I stopped playing, and I got up to walk off, and Simon was actually stood on the side, and he was laughing and clapping. He went, Jesus, Andy, he said, where's that come from? And I thought, where's you? You just told me, you just gave me the secret of how to do it, you know. And I think, so that's that there. I know we've talked a lot of intellectual stuff about balance and all, and that's really trying to deal with theory, I think, and not letting theory become the master. Yeah. It remains the method. Yeah. But there's an example of it in practice of how when you play an instrument, you know, just try and do within the confines of what you can do. Just try and, you know, go for that. And I can remember a producer once said to me, I was trying to do something in the studio and it wasn't going well, and he turned around to me and he said, look, Andy, if it's worth doing badly. Which, if you think about it, and there's a parallel story to that, to Jimmy Page was in the studio once trying to play this quite hard guitar lick, and he couldn't get it, and he got it down, messed up a couple of lines, then he turned around to the engineer and says, they'll get the idea. They'll get the idea, yeah. So and I think it's you know, when we're talking about stuff like this, it's quite important just to remember that balance, you know, when you're learning the instrument of, you know, because if not, you'll get so overwhelmed with, like, you know, self-loathing, because you'll just end up comparing yourself to everybody who's apparently seems better than you. You know, I think this is the problem with music. It's I think. I can totally relate to what you're saying. We all can. Yeah. But I mean that was some amazing performance technique advice. I think of that as performance technique. Different things to remember, because there is a tendency to sort of try to push into what's your sort of top gear, or you so desperately want to get there. Partly, I think, because you feel like it's almost like turning up to a party and like you want to tell a really good joke, or you want to make someone laugh, because as soon as you do that, you know that you'll relax a little bit. So it's like, if I'm playing as soon as I do something complicated and really impressive and I pull it off and everyone's impressed,
I know after that I'll feel more relaxed because because then it's like, I know I've kind of got that, sort of tick that box now, and then I can sort of relax. But actually that's not really the best way to approach it, because then you're kind of like, you're too eager and you're too desperate to sort of get to that place, and it's not going to come out as a natural expression of what the music was needing at that point, or it's going to feel like you just tried to purposefully do something complicated.
You've said something profound there. It's not what the music needs at that point, because I always say the music's often tugging like this, going, you need to do this right now, and you go, shut up, I need to look good, you go away. This is the thing about being a musician the whole time, and with music students so often, because I teach in a college, so I'll have I could have 10 bands, and we're bringing in bands, and they're playing their thing, and you're outside of it going, well, this looks terrible, but they've spent weeks rehearsing it to make it look really good. But what it is their viewpoint is all egocentric, and it's all within, so they're just seeing it from their point of view, and that means let's try and play without making mistakes.
Right.
And I have to say to them over and over again, which you can really show this. I'll bring a band up and they'll start playing, and they're grooving, there's some emotion there, and then I'll leave it and they'll car crash. They'll car crash halfway through, but then when they car crash, everyone who's watching claps. And I'll go, why are they clapping? Because they liked it. Nobody cares. You could go wrong. No one's going to care if you go wrong.
Yeah.
If somebody comes like James Brown groove comes on and everyone's nailing it, and they go, and they're nailing it. And then say 2 minutes in, they crash. They have to actually start again. It doesn't wipe out the feeling you'd had. And then suddenly you realise you don't want to be making mistakes, because there's a balance point. If you watched a gig where people were making mistakes continually, it would start to be a detriment. But you can make mistakes.
Yeah.
I've often had to, when I'm rehearsing bands, I'll often say, they're not going to hear these mistakes, the audience. They're not going to hear them. And you can see the band relax and go, yeah, you're right, Andy. Because they're so focused on not making mistakes that they're not focusing on doing a good performance. They're not focusing on communicating to the audience.
Yeah, there's so many other different elements that we shouldn't just be thinking about, how damage control, how to not make mistakes. We should actually be thinking about the broader aspects of it, how it's being received, and
that can be in rock and roll can be putting your leg on the monitor, or even just moving around while you're playing, or
just being relaxed,
playing to people and moving your focus around. But also, if I remember when I was a kid, I really loved Miles Davis, and the reason I liked Miles Davis was because I could pick up my guitar and I could listen to him, and the thing would come in and he'd go ba ba da da, and then I could find the notes, da, 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 and then you go ba da 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 da, and I go, what's that? Da, 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 da. And the reason I liked him is he put these gaps in. And so what I realised that Miles was going, here's a statement, ba da da da, ba ba da 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 da, da da ba da da. He'd do this. And giving he's going, I'm not going to go so beyond you that you can't follow me anymore. Because he could play like that. This idea that Miles didn't have virtuosity, this is just utter nonsense, because I've heard him on record playing high and fast and insane. And he was picked by Charlie Parker. I mean, how many of us could drop into Charlie Parker's band at 21 years old? He was a monster. Exactly, but he had a greater knowledge, which was how to communicate to an audience. This is why he's a master musician. A master musician is someone who can communicate to the audience, and again, there are millions of ways of doing that, but that's something that you have to really be aware of, I think, because everyone does it in their own way, and the more you can learn what is going to be your personal communication, what you do, or what that nobody else does, once you start portraying that, then you'll become one of those musicians that everyone's looking at going, oh my God, I'm not as good as them. I wish I could be like them, because I think that's the reason why the great musicians are great, is because they've worked a way of communicating themselves to the audience. Does that make sense? Not that they got everything nailed and they know they can play everything and know everything. certain musicians will have that sort of virtuosity element more than others, but it doesn't mean that they're greater. It just means that their vision musically probably required more virtuosity, you know, to put across. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a sense of purposefulness about it. So, if if you're going to have different techniques or a different level of complexity, you know, there's not any real point in going after it if you don't really know what you don't have, at least have a feeling of what you're going to do with it. Because I mean, you don't really know what you're going to do or how it's going to be effective until you learn these things. But I think there needs to be some spark, though, that maybe it's just that you like that music, or is there something about it which you find really it just really grips you. But I think it always needs to be in service of something, and it depends on the musical vision.
Yeah,
of that person. You know.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the individual. I think philosophies that value the individual above everything else. So and this can in music, this can happen with genre. You can get stuck into a genre where that genre becomes like the group you're in. And then you disappear, your individuality disappears, you know. So say playing in a metal band, and you suddenly find your guitar tone's got to be exactly this way, you've got to sound like this, your drums have to sound like this, and before you know it, you have been subsumed by the group. And then what you find is you get nowhere. You get nowhere because you are just now the bland mass of everybody who's just trying to do exactly the same thing.
And
then suddenly someone in your genre goes, no, I'm going to do it my way, and they come out and do it their way, and then suddenly they're huge and the whole genre changes. And these are the things that really make for master music making. And I think as a student, the quicker you can realise your own strengths as an individual, and I find jazz terrible for this. Really find jazz, especially now that jazz has become this sort of music college student,
I see what you mean. Yeah,
an assault course that you do, and then someone will say, check out this new guy that's come out, and what I see is someone just showing I could do giant steps and I could play this. Now I'm going to play that, you know, and I'm going to play really fast, really loud, and I'm going to play all the correct scales. You know, that's something that, and I have this all the time. My students go, check this guy out, and I put it on, and they're like, it's like that, and I'm going, yeah, great, but I grew up listening to Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Charlie Parker and Paul Desmond, and you know, and all the people I just mentioned are completely different to each other. And Thelonious Monk, he wasn't trying to show off that he could play giant steps, or he could, you know, because he had a vision.
I think that's sort of the thing with jazz has become like a form of classical music where there's such a huge body of work, and just to show that you're capable of being a jazz musician, it's like you've got to show that you're able to do all of these things and tick all these boxes and jump through all these hoops, and that you're, you know, as fast and as complex as all of the greats. So it's become, it's sort of become about that, just a kind of entry level.
Yeah, and I just scrap that, you know.
Yeah, it's the wrong way to approach it.
Listen to the music, take what you like from it, take the bits you love. If you want to play like Charlie Parker, then, you know, take from it, but balance that by the fact that learning to play Charlie Parker note for note is not going to get you anywhere. I have this with Alan Holdsworth, because Alan Holdsworth is my favourite guitarist, and if ever there was a virtuoso. But Alan Holdsworth's guitar playing is balanced by the most individual tone, the most individual approach to the guitar, the individual approach to chords. It's his personality. He didn't get there by copying anybody. He went completely his own route. And what he's done is create a ton of clones that he would have actually hated.
Probably.
You know what I mean? It's like I'm on the Alan Holdsworth, you know, groups on Facebook and stuff, and there's just hundreds of guys that have way more chops than I can ever imagine, going, here I'm playing the solo off this note for note, And I'm going, well, it is really impressive, and I am impressed by the display of skill. But is it music? No, of course it's not music. You've missed what music is by a mile. Now, of course, they might be doing their own music, and it's just a technical exercise. I understand that. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. But I think that there are a lot of people who just approach it in that way, though. I mean, it's not so different to people just playing violin and being like, right, I'm going to learn Tchaikovsky's violin concerto or all of that. Yeah. But it seems kind of different in a way because that music was composed in order for that to happen. You know, there's the
interpretation
is that they talk about being important. You know, whereas just
but the thing is that I've said this elsewhere. Classical music, I really like classical music, but classical music structurally is based upon like a feudal system. It was developed when there was only a feudal system. So you have the boss king that says everything, and everybody's a little serf that's got to do exactly what he says, and that's one way of making music. The thing that's amazing about jazz is jazz goes, don't have to do like that. We can have a structure where you can make high level music, but where the individuals can actually be individuals as well. This is like an upgrade. It's an upgrade, you know, and it is.
Yeah,
you know,
it's modern,
much more modern.
It's like jazz is becoming like a classical music.
Yeah. Now the question for you is does this happen with Indian classical music? Is this also the case?
Well, people don't play stuff note for note because the improvisation is so core. To it, you just can't be an Indian classical musician and not improvise. But there's such a tradition, there's such a sense of what that style is all about. But it's not so much about just trying to be, you know, trying to play exactly like Ravi Shankar or exactly like Valaya Khan. It's more that what's built into the music is the concept of rag, and rag being, you know, these different melodic structures. And so a lot of value is placed on how well you present a rag and how... because there's something sort of timeless about the rag. It's associated with like a disembodied spirit in a sense. So each rag has its own spirit and it has its own sort of mood.
That's really interesting because I didn't really know that. Yeah. And that's actually because that is a huge balance. If you're having to pay respects to that, your ego is not going to. Yeah. It's not going to come in.
The personality. I mean, it does because the musician's personality is like the vehicle through that. Yeah. But there is a very big, emphasis is put on the sort of the rag and like presenting that, and that kind of comes before like your own musical vision is sort of like you have to make it work with the rag.
Within those parameters, yeah.
And then also it's all about your respect to your guru. So it's not so much about, hey, this is me, this is my concept, because a lot of like the great jazz guys, I think part of the idea is like this is my concept. You know, I am Charlie Parker. This is my musical concept. I'm Miles Davis. You know, this is my vision. But with Indian classical music, it's more like everything's thanks to my guru.
Yeah,
this is all thanks to my guru. You know, it's so, and thanks to his guru and to their guru and this and that.
I can remember chatting to Simon Phillips. Simon Phillips told me a story that he was at a drum festival with Billy Cobham, and Billy had come out and just blown everybody away. And Art Blakey actually came up and sort of said, "Billy, that was amazing, but always remember that you are basically just carrying on what has happened before." And I think in jazz there is that too. There is an awareness that we're carrying on. That you're standing on the shoulders of giants. I think any great musician would be aware. But I actually dug this out for you because I love this album here.
Okay.
This is why I asked the question. This is a Shankar album. Do you know this album?
No, I don't know any of the Shankar stuff from like after. I've always wanted to hear.
Well, if you see, it says Indian classical music, right? Yeah. And it's got two rags on it there. I don't know if you can see that, right?
Oh yeah, because these are South Indian rugs, so I don't know them so well.
But this thing that's always interested me. The title of this album is "Who's to Know."
Who's to Know? Yeah.
And I think what he's done on here is he's made music that sounds like, to a Westerner, this would sound like Indian classical music, but it's not quite Indian classical music. Because I wonder what the experiment would be. You know, that I'm sure. I'll just pop this back up.
I'm running out of time a bit.
Yeah, I didn't know how long you wanted to go on for, you know.
No, I mean, I think we should do this again because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I thought we might talk about that we haven't even. So
no, I've been doing this a lot, and it's like what I learnt to do is actually really focus on what you're saying. And then try and go right into what you're saying, that rather than you saying what you wanted to say, because I thought we should talk about this because we were talking about really interesting stuff before, but the thing is that a lot of what you're saying, there's these fundamental elements in them, and I think they are. You know, that's why I said right at the start. You know, I said there's these fundamental things that you can sort of. You could focus on into, which I think for me, when you listen to people talk, it's those things that really, for me personally, have influenced me the most. Is where somebody's just said, you know, and I've tried to, what we're talking, because we could get really technical, would we, and start going on. You know, like there's this rhythm I do in 21/16, and I divide it like this, and I thought that might be interesting to go down that route, but actually for people watching stuff like this.
Oh sure, yeah. I mean, I was thinking that we might even explore a bit more of like your background and more about learning process, or talking about. Well, we have talked about some different artists, but But no. I mean, this has been amazing. This has been really, really great.
I think I think of all the ones, the YouTube videos I've done. This one has been one of the deepest ones in terms of what we've spoken about.
Wow. Okay.
And on my YouTube. On my YouTube, like a couple of weeks ago, I thought I'm going to get it a bit heavier, and I did a couple of videos. Well, I think they're the ones you saw. That's why you contacted me.
It was. I was thinking to kind of right from the beginning, but I think that as you started to talk about things and go into more depth, I started thinking, oh yeah, okay, this is really, we really need to try and share a bit of this. Yeah,
I've found that has really seemed to get to people. I'm just lucky because I've been teaching music for 30 years, and you have a real problem. And I teach privately, obviously, so I teach one-to-one, but I have to teach like 40 kids. I got 40 kids in the room, all like different types of music, all different abilities. Some have got perfect pitch, and some of them can only just play a power chord, and some of them are like music producers and stuff like that. And I think over the 30 years, I didn't realise it, but I've amassed a whole bunch of quite fundamental things that when I get up and tell the group, or I work from these ideas, that's probably what it is more, I'll work from these ideas, that you'll get more out of that group, you know, that kids learn more by really focusing on these things. And a lot of the time, being told, don't worry about making mistakes, you know, don't worry about... it being perfect is actually a much bigger thing for them ending up sounding perfect. Because there's like a Zen aspect to this.
Oh yeah.
You know, if you want to achieve one thing, you usually need to try and do the opposite to achieve the thing you want to get to. So, because I think sometimes I'm like this in the studio when I'm working in bands. I'll be really like, oh, that take will do, and then someone goes, no, I need to do another take. So no, let's move on, and I get known for being slapdash, but it's not. It doesn't make the record sound slapdash. If you, what you're trying to do is make the record sound exciting.
Yeah, it keeps the freshness.
So I think we've really touched on some really good stuff in this video.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we'll definitely have to do it again. Maybe once September comes around, or
definitely.
We'll do it again, and it was really interesting to talk to you, and yeah, I just really like the way that you can dive into things quite deeply, but it always feels like there's a lot we can actually take away from it and really apply into our own music, into our own practice.